All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the City of Hartford Charter Revision Commission to order at 7:33 on Wednesday, August 3rd, 2022. And we will start with the roll call. Adam Murphy, please take it away.
James Wolfe.
Present.
Raul De Jesus Jr. Raul De Jesus Jr.
I'm here.
Thank you. John Gale.
Present.
Here.
Yep.
Arunan Arulampam.
Present.
Steve Bonafonte.
Here.
Vicky Gallon Clark. Kamora Harrington. Ken Kennedy. Kathleen Kowalsham.
Here.
Melvin Medina. Yadira Jeter.
Here.
Bruce Rubenstein. Eon Smith. Peter Yazbak. Here. Thank you. Good quorum.
Thank you, Adam. I'd now like to move on to item number 2, approval of the minutes from May 31st, 2022.
So move.
The motion. The motion was made by Commissioner De Jesus. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Gale. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it and the motion carries. We'll now move on to item number 3, presentation regarding the Court of Common Council resolutions. And I would like to recognize that we have Council President Rosado here from the Court of Common Council. And we also have Corporation Counsel Howard Rifkin, who will provide us with a presentation about the resolutions that were approved by the Court of Common Council last week pertaining to changes to the draft charter that was sent down by this commission to the council. So, Madam President, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to point out for the record that this technically, statutorily, is the conferral meeting. What you're going to be doing now is conferring, presenting the resolutions, and there's a conferral between council, between yourself, Madam President, and council and the commission. So I just wanted to make sure that was clearly understood on the record that this is the conferral meeting for statutory purposes.
Thanks for that, Steve. Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank the commission for their tremendous work. I know that you've had numerous meetings, and here we are through the charter revision, a year and plus. So thank you so much for your commitment to the service of the city of Hartford. I know that this work is voluntarily, so it is much appreciated. So thank you. I also want to thank Attorney Mednick for your due diligence and the service to this commission and to our corporation counsel, and to our wonderful chair, James Wolfe. Thank you for your dedication and commitment to the city, and also our vice chair. With that said, I will now turn it over to Corporation Counsel Rifkin with the presentation that he has for us this evening. You're still on mute, Corporation Counsel.
Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Council President and Commissioners. The Court of Common Council met and adopted 2 resolutions to send back to the Commission. One was a technical amendment resolution that tried to clarify some provisions in the draft proposed charter, as well as making some corrections or errata changes to the draft. And then secondly, the council adopted a resolution with more substantive changes that the council is recommending to the Charter Revision Commission. I believe that what was sent to the membership was a merged draft of the two changes, as well as what I would propose to do is to just highlight the substantive changes, and then Councillor Mednick can talk about and highlight some of the errata or technical changes that also have some, I think, questions for the commission to answer or to consider. So if that's okay, Mr. Chairman, I would proceed that way.
Yes, thanks, Howard. Please proceed.
Okay, so I'm just going to do a summary. I think maybe members of the commission received this. I made some additions to it. So let me just run through it. These are really the highlights. We're happy to answer any detailed questions that members of the commission have about these substantive changes that are being proposed. The first one is in Chapter 1, Section 4, the definition section of the proposed charter with respect to capital, the definition of capital expenditure. The recommendation here is to delete that. The definition that was in the proposed charter really isn't a workable definition of capital expenditure with respect to municipal government. And so the recommendation here is to just strike that and then rewrite the provisions in the budget section with respect to the capital improvement program, which is the capital budget of the city of Hartford. The second one is found under Chapter 4 related to the council, Section 1, parens B, which is recommended to delete the phrase office of profit. This section has to do with would prohibit a person, an office of profit at the state, federal level, or in another municipality from holding office as a member of the Court of Common Council. That seemed, it's an unworkable definition. The phrase office of profit is actually found in common merely reference any other elect office, so that a member could not be in another elected office and also sit on the Court of Common Council. The next one, the third one, is also found in Chapter 4 related to the council, and it is to establish a couple of things. One is that the town and city clerk, the office would be in the Court of Common Council for administrative and budgetary purposes, and also would establish that the clerk's term is coterminous with that of the council, and that the town and city clerk would serve at the pleasure of the council as an at-will employee. The fourth one is also found in the provision substantial changes with respect to staff.
Excuse me, Howard, could you just restart after the clerk? You cut out there for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so the one that I was just referring to is Chapter 4, Section 4, parens D. This has to do with council staff. Essentially, what this proposed change would do is would eliminate the articulation of all of the various positions that are highlighted or listed in the proposed charter revision, and rather say that the council can appoint such full-time professional, clerical, and administrative staff as it deems necessary. And that by ordinance, the council can determine which positions, responsibilities are within the classified service or unclassified service as the city council may establish by ordinance. The next one is under Chapter 5 related to the mayor, and it is more or less a correction, I think, so that the intent of tying the mayor's salary to that of a Superior Court judge carries forward every time there is an adjustment to the mayor's salary. And I think the belief is that this would take it out of the political thicket of arguing over what the compensation level of a mayor should be. The one after that is also found under Chapter 5, the provisions related to the mayor, Section 3. It would delete the requirement that the corporation council be an elector of the city. What another provision would do is it would add the corporation council to the list of appointments, mayoral appointments, that a residency requirement would be determined by ordinance adopted by the Court of Common Council. That is parenthetically not a self-serving proposal. The next one is related to the treasurer. That's Chapter 6, Section 2, subsection A. It would potentially allow for deposits of city money into state or federally chartered credit unions. That would only be done in consultation with the treasurer, in addition to qualified depository institutions. The idea here is for the possibility that credit unions could actually receive payments of tax bills, and that they could not do that unless they were qualified. They were qualified to receive deposits of city funds. There's also, within the chapter on the treasurer, there's deletion of language regarding disbursement of trust fund dollars. It was viewed that that would make it, that requirement for the treasurer to approve any disbursement of trust fund dollars would be at odds with ordinances related to the Parks Trust Fund, which allows the mayor and the city council to disperse or appropriate a certain percentage of investment income from the Parks Trust Fund for purposes consistent with the provisions of the Park Trust Fund. And this deletion was acceptable to City Treasurer Cloud. Then turning to Chapter 7, with respect to boards and commissions, there is a proposal to eliminate the requirement that boards and commissions meet on a monthly basis. It does establish a minimum standard of meeting on a quarterly basis unless specified otherwise by ordinance adopted by the council. Secondly, it eliminates duplication of effort and requires that the city clerk maintain records of appointments to boards and commissions and be responsible for notifying the mayor and the council of vacancies or the pendency of any vacancy. In the draft, it was unclear that whose responsibility was what, either the mayor's office or the city clerk. And I think the council believed that this was the better approach. It would maintain mayoral appointments that exist currently to boards and commissions, and of course, maintaining the approval of the Court of Common Council. It would propose adding alternates to the Board of Assessment Appeals. The current Board of Assessment Appeals only has 3 members, and it's believed that adding alternates would be helpful. And then finally, under planning and zoning, it specifies that any ordinance referred for review to planning and zoning for comment would comply with the provisions found in Section 8-24 of the Connecticut General Statutes. The language in the charter was inconsistent with Section 824, and I think it was felt that marrying the 2 provisions together made sense. In Chapter 8, with respect to departments and department heads, the proposal is to increase the threshold beyond which there is a requirement for bidding out goods and services from $25,000 established in 2002 to $50,000, and also to allow the council to make adjustments by ordinance periodically consistent with inflation and the consumer price index. And finally, Chapter 10, that's the budget provisions. Excuse me. There are a number of recommendations for changes to those provisions, which includes clarifying that the general fund or operating budget revenues do not include grant funds, which are dealt with separately through resolutions by the council authorizing receipt of grant monies. They're not part of the appropriations process. It deletes language in the budget provisions relating to contractual provisions that relate to general wages and other wage adjustments as a result of collective bargaining agreements, including the provision that would require the mayor to introduce a quote unquote additional compensation ordinance, which would specify appropriations to support necessary expenditures like shift differential, overtime, weekend, and holiday pay, etc. We note that each collective bargaining agreement negotiated by the city and approved by the council has an Appendix A, which delineates most of this information in the context of each specific bargaining unit. The proposal also would add language to give the mayor additional authority to modify any reduction made by the council in the budget process, in addition to the current authority to disapprove or reduce any item or items of expenditure adopted by the council in the budget process. It is believed that this additional tool, it would make the adoption of the of the budget ultimately smoother and allow for a compromise budget to be achieved. I note that with respect to that provision, Attorney Mednick has offered some language, additional alternative language, which I think says the same thing as what's in the current charter as proposed to be amended, but may be a little easier to read. And I don't think there's a problem with that. So those are the highlights of the proposed substantive changes. I'd be happy, and Council President Rosado, I'm sure, would be happy to answer any questions that you may have about those. And then we could move to Attorney Mednick highlighting some of the technical and errata changes and lingering questions that remain.
Thank you, Howard. Are there any questions from the commission for Howard or the council president? Okay, seeing none, Attorney Mednick.
Well, I have just one question on the substance, and there's not much to say on the erratas there. We fixed a number of things, and I will ask for authority to continue to fix through the approval of the document by the charter. But in the council staff section, I raised a question about the terminology that was used, which is for the council staff, which talks about, and this is section, what's the section? What's the council staff section? I can't.
Section 4.
Yeah, it's 4.
Subsection D.
Yeah, 4D, where the term is used that the funding would be within available appropriations, which is distinguished from the mayoral staff function, which is for which the council shall appropriate sufficient funds. And it wasn't clear to me why there should be a difference between those two. It's a minor point, and if it makes no difference to the council, I will stand back, but I just didn't know why there would be a differential in the language in those two sections within available appropriations versus for which council shall appropriate sufficient funds. I don't know if Howard has any thoughts on that.
I'm happy to answer that.
Go ahead, Howard.
First, the language with respect to the mayor's staff is existing language, which was not reviewed, I don't believe, by the commission in the first instance or the council in review of the proposed charter revisions that were put before the city council. But having said that, I did write a response to Steve's comment in the margins of the draft, I think, that you all received. And essentially what I said was, I think it's a distinction without a difference. The fact is that while it is true that the provisions related to the mayor's staff speaks to shall appropriate, I would just note that there is a cap imposed on the mayor's the expenditures on behalf of the mayor's staff by ordinance. I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's like 4 times the mayor's salary is the cap that of monies that can be appropriated to support those positions that are articulated in the charter. Secondly, it seems to me that were the mayor not a mayor, not to recommend back to the council an appropriation for council staff that was less than what the council had asked for, that in the budget process, the council would put that money back. And so as I said at the top, I think it's a distinction without a difference.
Thank you, Howard. Steve, anything else?
Yeah, the only thing I will say is most of the changes have to do with capitalizations. There were a couple of significant erratas, which the Corporation Council came across with respect to qualifications for the Planning and Zoning Commission, which have been fixed. We also fixed the definition of classified service as an errata because it was already defined internally within the charter. The most significant one, and I did not make any change, but I wanted to raise this with the commission and get Mally's, the president's comments on, or maybe Howard's comments as well. On the term majority vote of the council, we already, in fact, Commissioner Gale, Councilmember Gale and I talked about this the other day. There already is a definition within the body. In order to arrive at clarity, I basically took that definition and made it the definition of majority vote of the council. But at this time, the majority vote of the council applies not only to ordinances, but to all actions of the council. And I raised some time ago whether or not there would be an interest in having a lesser standard for resolutions or other actions of the council. I didn't want to do any drafting without permission to do so. That would be, in my view, the only outstanding issue. You can go either way on it. The majority standard that they have is a fairly significant and useful standard. But if you wanted to have a standard that would be more of a shifting standard that wasn't built on the entire membership of the council for lesser items, we could do that, and we could draft language for that. And even though this is the last meeting, have it run by, maybe hold the meeting open, have everybody look at the language if they wanted to be comfortable with it. I have no strong recommendation in that regard. I wanted to at least raise the issue, which was raised some time ago, as to whether want to have a different standard for resolutions or orders or other motions of the council.
To answer your question, Steve, I have had conversations with this council body, and the majority has agreed that we'd like it to stay the way it is currently in the charter.
Excellent. I just wanted clarity.
Thank you.
And that's all I have. And the only thing I would ask is to, when you adopt a resolution this evening, sending it back to the, assuming you are sending it back to the commission, to the council, to make sure that we continue to have errata authority to fix changes and internal changes all the way through the final approval by the council. And I have one very important question to ask, and it's a question for Commissioner Jeter. I've been carrying her name officially as Yadira Rivera, and I think that's the name it's been carried on our attendance sheets. And I wanted to know, for the purpose of the historical record on the cover of the charter, whether she wanted to be Yadira Rivera or Yadira Jeter or Yadira Rivera Jeter. And we don't need a motion or a second. I just wanted a response to see how we should fix that.
Yes, I am officially Jadira Jeter.
All right, Jeter, sorry.
Thank you.
With your permission and the permission of the chair, I will fix the cover of the charter to so reflect.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any further questions for Howard or the council president? Okay. Councilman Gale, do you have a question?
I have a comment. I'm not sure when we're opening this up for discussion. I
was going to move it over to the next for discussion momentarily. All right, seeing no further questions for Howard, we can move on to item number 4, consideration of the charter revisions proposed by the Court of Common Council. So I will entertain a motion to approve the changes recommended in the 2 resolutions sent to the Charter Revision Commission by the council. And and also providing Attorney Mednick with the ability to make changes to errata issues, and also recognizing the small tweak that Attorney Mednick made to the mayor's veto power.
So move.
The motion's been
Second.
made by Commissioner DeJesus and seconded by Commissioner Kowalczyk. Is there any discussion? Councilman Gale.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I want to go back to this budget item because I'm a little confused. It strikes me when we were discussing this in charter revision, and perhaps former Councilman DeJesus can remember this, as it probably came close to home for him as well. And I know we had some other council members that were on the commission, some former council members who were on the commission. One of the things that I, as a council member, have struggled with over the years is receiving the budget from the mayor and not really understanding exactly how much grant money was included in the budget. And it's, I mean, you know, it's a significant difference. You know, I think our budget this year, $590 million, but the total expenditures of the city of Hartford are almost $900 million. And the difference there is a lot of grant money. And so as I recall, when we were discussing this, I chimed in and said, you know, I'd like to make sure that when we get our budget book, it's telling us what they're anticipating. And it does tell us, I mean, the current budget book does tell us grant monies in it. It does talk about how many full-time employees are being funded through the general operating fund and how many full-time employees are being funded by grant monies. However, I will note that not every department was compliant with that. We would get like 90% from departments, and we weren't always getting 100%. So I thought that this change to 2C in the budget was designed to help council understand when it was adopting a budget, how much grant money administration was expecting to receive, and how administration felt that grant money should be expensed. And I've heard corporation counsel say, well, you know, the change that council adopted struck the grants portion of it because council adopts by resolution accepts all the grant money, which is true. By resolution, we do have to accept all this grant money, but that's rolling over a 12-month period. And so maybe I'm off base. Maybe this change doesn't deal with my particular concern, but that's the question I want to raise. I'm not supportive of this change if what it means is that our budget process is going to be less robust. I don't want to take anything away from council's budget process and council's ability to see the entire picture of all the money that's being expended by administration in every single department. So that's my concern.
Thank you, Councilman. And I'll recognize Howard Rifkin to answer that question.
Thanks. Councilman Gale, I think the distinction that I would make is we do appropriate those grants that are counted as revenue to the city of Hartford. So, for example, all the statutory formula grants that we get from the state of Connecticut, which amounts to and is treated as a revenue, is part of the appropriation process. But you're quite correct that because grant opportunities that are made available to the city through the bond commission or federal funds that become available, for which the city either has to apply for or compete for, are not in the normal course of general fund budgeted items. Hasn't happened at a municipal government level. It doesn't happen at the state government level. As a former deputy budget director of the state of Connecticut many decades ago, it would make the budgeting process almost impossible to do because grants become available periodically. They don't, or as you said, Councilman Gale, on a rolling basis. And so, so to the extent that there are multi-year grants that are paying for salaries of employees, those are noted and part of the budget process. But the kind of grants that we might have be made available to us, including the ARPA funds, for example, those monies were allocated through a separate process approved by the Court of Common Council, or for that matter, the CDBG monies that are appropriated every year go through a separate and distinct process. So I don't know if that's helpful, and I understand where the concern comes from, but I think that there's a little bit of mixing apples and oranges there.
I can certainly appreciate that. I may not understand an apple from an orange here. And thank you for clarifying that from your perspective, at least, nothing is changing, that grants that are multi-year grants that are known in advance are included in the budget, and the expenditures associated therewith are included in the budget. And that's certainly my concern. It just then raises the question of, what is this change all about in 2C? I guess then it comes back to me like, I don't understand. I'm not really understanding what that language did to begin with, and now what the change is going to do. How it's going to change the budget process, if you will.
I'm sorry. So through you, Mr. Chairman, I don't think it changes anything. What it does is it restores language that exists in the charter with respect to the budget making process. So it strikes what would have been a requirement to appropriate grant funds, all grant funds, which I would argue is nigh impossible.
Not just grant funds of which we know.
Right. That's the way it read. So so my interpretation and belief is that this doesn't change anything. The language that is proposed to be stricken from the proposed charter revision would essentially restore the provisions that exist in the charter currently.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may just follow up.
Yes.
Restoring what was there was somewhat problematic for me. As I mentioned, in my now 7 budgets that I've gone through with City Council, in 6 prior years, until this most recent year, there was one department that consistently failed to tell us what grant monies was being received from that department and how they were being spent. So, I hear you saying restoring the language. Well, restoring the language doesn't help me as a council member, because this was a continued problem. We didn't know and would have to ask, and sometimes didn't get, and frankly, never, many times didn't get an answer. And so, I'm wondering if there's a fix here that just leaves this in with respect to multi-year grants. I mean, I understand we're not trying to require as you say, it's a near impossibility. Who can estimate whether ARPA funds are going to come about until they come about? But there are routine grants that we know come in each and every year, and that the departments factor into their budgets because they know they can, count on most of it. So I'm not sure if you understand my concern there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I do. I think the concern here was whether it implies or states that the general fund budget, the Appropriations Act, would be appropriating grant monies received from the state or federal government, which would not necessarily be treated as revenue to the city.
If I may, I think that the intent of the language was talking about those funds that were those departments that were receiving or expending city funds that were through grants, which means they are pre-existing grants that are part of the planning process for that agency and presumably utilized in funding positions. It was not intended to cover unanticipated or unknowable grants. It was those that are in the bloodstream of the city, so that they could be so that they can be earmarked and demonstrated as to where and how they're being utilized in the gross budget of the city, which is not inconsistent with best practices under GFOA. That was the intent of that section, which was initially negotiated with the finance director. It was not intended to capture things that are unknowable. So, and I don't see how the language was not clear in that regard, just to make the point.
Well, not to be argumentative, I don't think it was clear in that regard, and leaves to a concern about whether we're actually appropriating grant monies, other than those grant monies, as I said before, statutory formula grants, for example, that in fact are treated as revenue to the city. So maybe there's some additional language that can be found so that the council understands what, and maybe we need to say what you mean with respect to if there are grant funds, multi-year grant funds that a department is using to support their budget, then perhaps that is the way to describe what it is Councilman Gale and others might want.
Councilman Gale.
Without making it part, without making it part of the appropriations process.
So, Mr. Chair, I would move to amend the motion to exclude from the acceptance of the council recommendations, the recommendation concerning this particular section, Chapter 10, Section 2C, which by doing so, my amendment is to leave the language that the Charter Revision Commission came up with. And I certainly, I don't know if we have the leeway to allow Attorney Mednick and Attorney Rifkin to negotiate some language that satisfies any concern Attorney Rifkin has, but I think Attorney Mednick very clearly stated the concern that this commission had and the intent behind that section. And so my amendment is to we do not accept the recommendation with respect to Chapter 10, Section 2C.
Commissioner Gale, would it be possible to propose a floor amendment with language? Would you be open to that? Steve and Howard, I believe that's a possibility with specific language. Would that be correct?
if somebody wants to come up with the language, I mean, it strikes me that the only word I heard here that seemed to be universal between Attorney Rifkin and Mednick was multi-year. If Attorney Rifkin is happy with slipping the word multi-year grants into section 2C, that may then satisfy the concern the council had, that we know what the revenues are and what the expenditures are, and takes into account Attorney Rifkin's concern that we're not trying to anticipate grant monies that we don't yet know about. It's like, because I don't think that's our intention at all.
I think if we added that, it would probably work.
I'll be happy to then to make my amendment that we adopt. I'll change the amendment to say that we adopt council's recommendation with respect to chapter 10, section 2C, with the addition of the word multi-year in between the words federal funding and grants.
Okay, motion's
Federal
been-
funds and, I'm sorry, in between the words federal funds and granted.
Okay, motion's.
Why
been-
don't you put it before state or federal, multi-year state or federal funds?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Whatever Attorney Mednick said.
Okay. And I'll go over it with Howard just for clarity.
Okay, and Councilman Gale, can you add to the motion potentially the ability to allow Steve and Howard to make some technical changes should there need to be around that with regards to any tiny, wording changes?
Yes, added to the amendment.
Okay. Motion's been made by Commissioner Gale. Do we have a second? Councilman Blather.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Adam Murphy, will you call a roll call vote on the amendment?
Yep. Commissioner Wolf,
Yes.
Commissioner De Jesus,
Yes.
Commissioner Gale,
Yes.
Commissioner Arlen,
Yes.
Commissioner Bonifante,
Yes.
Commissioner Gallon Clark, Commissioner Harrington, Commissioner Kennedy, Commissioner Coalition,
Yes.
Commissioner Medina, Commissioner Jeter,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubenstein, Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Yazbak.
Yes.
The amendment on the motion passes. Okay, now we're back to the underlying issue. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. Adam Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Wolf,
Yes.
Commissioner De Jesus,
Yes.
Commissioner Gale,
Yes.
Commissioner Arlen,
Yes.
Commissioner Bonifante,
Yes.
Commissioner Gallon Clark, Commissioner Harrington, Commissioner Kennedy, Commissioner Coalition,
Yes.
Commissioner Medina, Commissioner Jeter,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubenstein, Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Yazbak.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Adam Murphy. And before we adjourn tonight, Steve, would you mind walking the commissioners and any of the members of the public watching through the rest of the process?
The remainder of the process, after tonight, we will clean up the final version. I will go through it, make sure that all the internal references are in pretty good shape now that we have, it looks like a final document. The document will be submitted to the council for their approval or their disapproval. The council has the ability to approve in whole or part or disapprove in whole or in part. The council also, when they take their action, will also be adopting questions for the ballot. And so the president and I had a brief conversation about that. I think we're going to follow up on that conversation to develop the questions for the November ballot. And once they do that, they have to do that within the next 15 days. The ballot questions will go to the Secretary of State's office the first week in September, and this item will be placed on the ballot in November with the gubernatorial election in the gubernatorial election cycle this November. One other thing the council can do or the town clerk can do is put out an explanatory text that kind of walks through the revisions chapter by chapter for the voters. It's a non partisan, not a campaign piece. It's an objective piece that simply recites objectively the items that were modified by the commission. And so your commission will be in existence, although dormant. You may probably have a meeting possibly to approve the minutes of this meeting so that they're approved, a technical meeting at some point. The moment that the commission takes final action, you're out of business, although there's really nothing for you to do except maybe approve minutes at a small technical meeting. I have one of my commissions meeting at 9 o'clock next Monday morning to do that in Fairfield next week. So you'll probably have one more technical meeting to approve this last set of minutes. I think that's pretty much it. I imagine the president would submit the chair would appear before the council, however the president wants to run that, and make a final presentation, and it will be that'll be the end of the process.
Thank you, Steve. Howard, do you have a comment you'd like to make? Howard, you're on mute. Howard, you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Attorney Mednick, does the 15 days for the council to act begin to run from tomorrow, or when, in fact, the council receives the modified document?
It's from the date of the approval, so it's from tonight.
Okay. So then the council, I believe, then needs to act by August 18th.
They will need a special meeting.
Counted correctly, right? Correct?
Roughly. I think that's, I haven't looked at my calendar, but it's pretty close.
Okay. It is not August 22nd, which would be the next regularly scheduled.
We've talked about it. They're going to need a special meeting to get this done. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
I wanted to clarify that.
No, absolutely. The president and I have chatted about that, so that will be necessary. If I may, Mr. Chair, just for one moment, are we getting close to the end of this meeting?
All right, if you have any final comments, please provide them, Steve.
All I want to say is thank you to everybody. I want to thank the president. She was kind enough to mention me in her opening comments. It's been a pleasure working with Mallory Rosado. She's an outstanding legislator, and it's been just a privilege working with her. And I see the majority leader, TJ Clark, on the line as well. I've done many of these as my fourth Hartford charter. I want to just say that it's been an interesting process, quote unquote, interesting. And I want to thank James Wolfe. It's been a pleasure working with some young blood in Hartford, somebody I had never worked with before, and it's been a true honor and privilege working with James in this process. I think there's a lot to be proud of in this document. There's been some level of steam and controversy, but I'm going to tell you, we didn't talk about it tonight, but we did an awful lot with regard to eliminating some of the old special act provisions, and in terms of cleaning this up, providing definitions. thank you to Howard, are now fully accurate and portray exactly the terms that are in the charter as well. And so I just wanted to express my appreciation to the members of the commission, both here and who are watching at home on television. So I just wanted to thank everybody for their cooperation in this process, and thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve, for all the work that you've done over all the meetings that we've had. I think we're approaching 30 if we're not there. I want to thank David Grant and Adam Murphy, who have been incredibly supportive to this commission and helping with getting us organized and getting meeting minutes and other things that we need to pull together for us in a timely fashion, and helping us getting these meetings up and running. We certainly could not have done it without you. I want to thank all of the commissioners tonight for their service. Public service can be difficult. We're all volunteers, and we have spent many nights and probably weekends reviewing these documents, working on these issues, and we're here volunteering because we love this city and we want to give back. So I want to thank all the commissioners for their service. And I also want to thank the council president and Howard Rifkin for their work, and for appearing before us tonight and guiding us through this last meeting before the technical meeting. So with that, without objection, we will stand adjourned at 8:29. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Record.